Hello, air signs Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. Welcome to the Cancer New Moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising sign listed below. Hello, Libra rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer happening on July the 18th at 4:32 a.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So it's going to be an early a.m. new moon. So you're welcome to get up early for it and to pray, or you can do that the night before on the Monday. Both will work. Both is fine. Let's have a little think first up about your public self, your legacy, your career, what you wish to leave behind, Libra. This is where Cancer is for you on your birth chart. This is your top of the chart. The most obvious, vibrant, bright part about you has a lot to do with the Cancerian philosophy. It's got a lot to do with initiating care, showing love, working on our emotional selves, helping others to work through their emotional bodies, their emotional systems. So at a new moon, obviously, as always, we get to make a wish list of what we hope to have happen over the following 12 months, how we hope for it to develop and to grow in that area too. Really awesome. I want you to think about that, and I want you to really enjoy this new moon, because 1 hour and a half later, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail change signs. And so this story that we've been dealing with over the last 18 months in Taurus and in Scorpio, in relationship to your 8th house, where you're contractually bonded to other folks, the house of grief and saying goodbye, and also responsibility to others, and the 2nd house of how we generate resources ourselves, what we do with them, how we spread them around, our value system. The last 18 months with those eclipses has been turbulent in those 2 houses for you, Libra, and I can imagine not without their difficulty for an energy that is so focused and so wanting harmony, to kind of feel this sort of perhaps in some ways like your devotion, or the way, certain relationships that that you feel there's been some sort of contract has been signed, and the power going in and out over the last 18 months, the jolts to the system, and what you've needed to sort of shed as far as your individuation, your own values, your own resources, what you've kind of felt needed to fall away. That's intense. It's more intense than that. Eclipses in your 1st house, your house of the self, the center, the soul, and your 7th house, the house of your relationships, how you come into contact with other folks, how you relate, how you love, how you show it. So the dragon's head is going to be in Aries. There was a horoscope probably about 4 months ago, I think, that gave us a taste of what that might look like. The dragon's tail will now finally be in your 1st house. So you might feel that this is like a preparation for the next 18 months, the first inkling of the next story as to what is going to fall away in regard to your individual speck of stardust. Perhaps there's layers that can peel off you finally. Perhaps you can be finally brave enough to reveal what you believe in, what values have stripped themselves, what you thought your values were, very different to what they are now. And so how does that story continue its shedding process in your 1st house? What are you leaving behind? What are you letting go of finally? And how is this going to affect your relationships? Now, we don't do anything with eclipses, do we? We just sort of witness and allow them to happen. I don't think that you need to be frightened of this, Libra. I think it's going to be really beautiful. And I think that your 7th house of relationships is going to benefit from what has happened over the last 18 months. If we can mark it in our calendar as the working in perfect harmony with the planets, then we can chill out in our Libra selves and be like, well, at least I'm doing that right. That's harmony as far as I can see it. There will be one more eclipse this year in October. It'll be a partial lunar eclipse in Taurus. So the dragon's head will be in Aries, but close enough to that lunation to have a partial eclipse in Taurus. And so it'll be like the last chapter, the last shedding in terms of your old value system, what you used to hold dear, what you used to believe in, what you used to put your money towards. Finito. And you can move through and continue that powerful work in your 1st and 7th house. So, I mean, great. So you can use this new moon in Cancer to make a wish upon a star and to think about your legacy. Think about your career too. I like a new moon in the 10th because it's sort of like, okay, well, am I happy on the path that I am now? Am I happy doing the work that I'm doing now? Is my image of what I'll be remembered for, what I will leave behind, is that accurate? It might not be accurate for you anymore, Libra, and so it's almost as if this new moon in Cancer is the perfect time for you to start again or ask for change it up. That could be awesome. At 24 degrees of Cancer, which is where the sun and the moon conjoin, creating the new moon, the tarot card for that is the 4 of Cups. And that's someone who is in such a state of meditation, such invested sort of internal work, that they're not really receiving messages from outside. They're not really available to receive the next sort of like emotional connection. In fact, it's kind of not really on top of their list to investigate. They're taking this rest, they're taking this moment for themselves. I encourage that you do that, Libra. I really do. And this isn't, I don't want to warn you and say, oh, the next 18 months are going to be hectic in regard to your relationships. I don't think that they will be, because the dragon's headed into your relationships. There's going to be mammoth things that show up for you, the internal workings of your ability to relate to other folks is going to really receive a lot of extra oomph. So it's almost as if this new moon in Cancer, it's like, okay, Uma's told me this. I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to integrate that. I'm going to start to think about my intimate bonds. This could be with your clients as well, like folks that are sort of like, you know, in your daily vibe, folks that are intimate bonds that you might come to mind as I'm talking about this. This new moon, 10th house, goals. What am I going to leave behind? How am I going to leave it behind? What does that look like? What am I using all of my time at the moment doing? What do I believe in? Who am I telling that I believe in this? How am I leading by example too? Cancer is like the emotional initiator. Cancer is a cardinal sign like you, Libra. That means that you instigate the season, you bring in the new weather. So when it comes to water, when it comes to our emotional selves, this is Cancer's job, is to be like, hello, what do you need? I can see, give me a hug, I'm going to take care of this. How are you feeling? All of these sorts of intimacies, you can think about them in regard to your 10th house. You can think about them in regard to how you're like spending your time. In a culture that we're all sort of told to, you know, toil away, work, grow this, grow that, buy this, buy that, you know, it's like, like if you're doing something that means nothing to you, you'll know that. And perhaps you can use this new moon in Cancer to change it up drastically, shift it around. There does feel like there's going to be all of these different sort of hectic, manic bits of astrology in the coming weeks after this new moon. So like, yeah, like sometimes discord sounds beautiful. Libra, is the sign that does think about harmonics. It does think about the sort of like variant layers of creating something, harmonious and beautiful and magical. Sometimes like clunkiness and discord is stunning. I don't know if you know John Cage. They're a musician from the 70s, I think. They did a lot of experimental sound work. Discord, chaos, it's also beautiful. If you've reached a point in your life, Libra, where you're sort of like, I have to focus on this from now on because I look around and I hear and see the turbulence in this world, and I can't actually focus my goals aren't here anymore. They're not centered on this part of life anymore. It kind of feels like I'm wasting my talent. I've got so much energy and so much concern and so much love for other folks. I want to make that part of my day today. I want to build that as part of my legacy and use this new moon to do that. In your relationships, your intimate ones will understand. I promise you that. And perhaps this dragon's head in the 7th is like, things are going to revolutionize. Things are going to change. The way that you relate to your near and dear ones, and also the way that you relate to the outside world too. Your energy will shift because you believe in yourself now and you feel that you're doing something that's worthwhile. That's lovely. So I'm going to get you some tarot cards, and just as I look down and see, okay, I want you to cast your eye out again to your sense of humanity, your sense of the human condition, your sense of belonging in a group. And I want you to think about those elements of life, and I want you to think about the year 2015 and what was developing for you in the year 2015 in the way that you felt that you belonged. If you feel that you didn't belong in 2015, if that was sort of like a teething ring, that you were sort of like, this ain't it, like I don't feel so, like, I don't feel that I'm being put to good use here, or I don't feel that these are really my people, there might be some similar kind of review coming up for you over the next months. Venus, the planet that rules your sign, will have stationed retrograde on the 23rd of July. So 5 days after this new moon in Cancer, it will have stationed retrograde in Leo. So Venus will be spending the next 4 months or so in Leo. Again, remember how last year Mars was in Gemini for that extended period of time? Well, it's Venus's turn, and this time it's going to be in Leo. The last time that they were in Leo for such a long time, stationing retrograde, was the year 2015. And Leo rules your 11th house, which is your sense of belonging in community, your sense of good fortune and great friends and happiness. So the reason that I say if it was difficult in 2015, and there may be another kind of chapter to that story about finessing and refining your sense of self in a group, that could be something that happens. There may have been a kind of awakening or a kind of freshness for you in 2015 that perhaps you're kind of looking forward to harking back to a little bit. That might be something that shows up for you too, Libra. This is getting confusing. I don't wish it to, but I think that what I'd like you to do for the rest of this year is pay attention to how your body reacts in 2015. I mean, can think of a lot of things that happened in 2015 that would create discomfort in a sense of belonging in community. I think that 2015 was sort of like the slow march towards a big shift for all of us globally that occurred in 2016, if you recall. I'm just putting the dots together myself, actually, Libra. It's different this time because Pluto is in Aquarius as of February of next year. That's power to the people, remember? I don't do this stuff to predict And I don't wish to do that. I think that I'm good enough to do that as well. I think that it can be maybe a bit irresponsible to give folks false hope, or kind of almost like sort of be like a mouthpiece to the doom scrolling. Like, that's not important to me. But just in this moment, I did recognize that the political era shifted. There was a campaign trail that occurred in 2015, which was a long march towards something else. So it's different now. And it's not going to be like that, like it was before. There's a lot of highly hateful language around at the moment. There's a lot of rights that are being reneged on. There's a lot of world leaders that are using vulnerable people as a red herring to keep themselves in power. They're agitating something, and they're buying into folks and their fear about the future, about the crisis of the planet that we're in right now, about the rising hate, all of those sorts of things. They're blaming it on the sanctity of a fantasy being put in peril by a very marginalized group. Pluto in Aquarius, power to the people. It's going to be all right. Two of Pentacles, Seven of Swords, Knight of Cups. Yeah. The lies are going to be revealed. The arrogance and it's frustrating. I'm getting really got goosebumps now. But the bald-faced bullshit lies, the mudslinging, the power, like Hunger Games, are all going to be revealed. There's going to be some dominoes toppling over the next years. There's going to be a reroute and a kind of resurgence of power to the people. Maybe over the next 18 months with the dragon's head in your relationship zone, you're really going to see who your values line up with. What you've learned over the last 18 months will bring you into company with folks that see you and witness you and love you as the person you are now. And the lies will be revealed. Justice will be served, Libra, I promise. And through that, there's going to be a beautiful, vulnerable, emotional offer for you. Once you can kind of loosen the back, once you can kind of like clear it, to stand in the face of that kind of aggression, you've got to cage up like a good dog. You've got to put your feet on the ground and really focus in. I understand that. Check the gate. Check for safety. There will be a time when you can relax. I promise you, Libra. So at this new moon in Cancer, think about what you wish to leave behind. Think about your career, your legacy, how you wish to be remembered. All of that beautiful, sweet, gentle, tender, loving care that's wrapped up in Cancer is wrapped up in you. And we'll move through the next round together. I'll be with you in 2 weeks for the full moon in Aquarius. We'll get to have a look at your self-expression. That'll be nice. Perhaps with that full moon, you might express a thing or two yourself. That could be beautiful. Throw me a crab in the comments if you're still here with me, please, Libra. That would be lovely. It's helping getting the work out. I can read your birth chart or your tarot cards over at umaruby.com. You can send me some tip money at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. I'll see you soon, Libra. I'm not going to apologize for the intensity of these readings. It just appears that this is the way that they're going. So I hope that there was some messages in there for you. If what I'm saying is really disinteresting, turn it off. If what I'm saying makes sense to you, it's all for you. Bye. Hello, Aquarius Rising. Welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer happening on Tuesday, the 18th of July at 4:32 a.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So it will be early morning. So if you can't get up that early to do your wish work, then you can do it the night before on Monday. That's so fine. It'll still work. Now we're looking at your sixth house at this new moon, Aquarius. The sixth is our daily rhythm, our daily routine and ritual. There's something ritual less to do in this sort of like beautiful kind of like ritual and more to do with like, right, I brush my teeth, I wash my hair, I go to work, I feed, like all of that kind of stuff. I chop the wood. There's something kind of repetitious about the sixth house, and it can have something to do with our health as well. The word work, possibly, in the sixth. So at a new moon, we get to reroute. We get to either forge a new path, or we get to think about our current circumstance and what we might wish to have happen there in the future. New moons are powerful, and they kind of help us work with the energy that is pre-existing here on the planet rather than receiving the kind of emotional overwhelm of the full moon. So there's that. Also, an hour and a half after this new moon, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail change signs. And so the story that we can remember that was unfolding over the past 18 months in regard to our legacy, our public life, and our home life, our ancestry, our private life, the power surges, the like shocks to the system, the disintegration, and also the revelation that maybe was occurring in those two parts of our lives, public versus private, is now shifting on through. And the next chapter of the story is about your folk magic, your village, and your want and need and urgency to travel and to move around and to spread your wings and to philosophize. Now, because you're an Aquarius rising, I'm a Pisces rising, I can almost give you like some feedback from my experience with the dragon's head moving like this. I'm like one step ahead of the game from you, Aquarius, because I, with Taurus and Scorpio, was working with that energy of folk magic in the third house and the village, and the sort of like exclamation mark on that part of life, and the shedding of the ninth house, which had me sort of reconcile my relationship with organized religion. It had me held in place, no traveling, no running, no expanding the mind there, here, here, here. It was like, nope, forget it. You need to shed that. You're going to find your voice right here, right now, where you are, in your old hometown. Stay there. So that's what we've kind of got to work with in the 18 months to follow. So the dragon's head will be at 0 degrees in Aries from 6 a.m. after this new moon. And so it kind of almost feels like there's something about like revitalizing the mundane, or changing up your relationship to repetition and to the rhythm of the day. I would like to think that there is potential for you to find some magical possibilities in that space, and maybe a bit of a change up of your village. So if we think of your local environment, I keep on using the word village, but it's sort of like that's the third house in Hellenistic astrology was the house of the goddess, as opposed to the ninth house, which was the house of the gods. So there's a sort of like gender disparity there. The way I read that is that the goddess is much more kind of private, and sort of like about sort of like independent rituals, about this sort of stuff, you know, about kind of like spiritual lessons that are shared with voice rather than in textbooks. This is where the dragon's head will be. This is where the sort of major emphasis will be. And it does speak to our environment, where we call home. So there's potentially going to be some shocks to the system there. There's going to be something that holds you where you are, maybe. And my advice is that that's okay, because I'm on the other end of this thing. There will be one more partial lunar eclipse in Taurus, just to put the stopper on the last series of eclipses that we had. For you, it was your home, your roots, your ancestry. You can almost see how the third and the fourth house are related too, because it can speak about physical space. It can also speak about an internal sense of safety and belonging as well. And so it's kind of moving away for you, moving away from my bloodline, my thoughts about my upbringing or ancestral trauma, into creating some space of identity for myself in a new village. For me, that was in my hometown, which is kind of, I have a checkered past with ancestry that's been coming up a lot for me over Cancer season 2, this sort of feeling of like not belonging anywhere, feeling of no safety net, kind of untetheredness has sort of followed me around. And I would often look to my 9th house to seek, to travel, to expand my mind, to run away. And during this time, that's been an impulse of mine, absolutely. But these eclipses have held me here. And so maybe there's something that you're almost going back to, Aquarius, back to the village, back to the neighborhood. And there'll be revelations that will occur there for you. At the lunations, we won't have any access to sort of like try and make things happen. And this isn't to say that your grand travel plans there'll be a pin pulled in there, nothing like that, but it might be there'll be more of a focus on your local environment. I hope this is making sense and I'm not just talking smack. So after the nodes change, after the dragon's head shifts into Aries, an hour and a half after this new moon, a couple of days to follow, there is going to be a face-off between Mars and Saturn. So Saturn in Pisces in your 2nd house of resources, money, and Mars in your 8th house of kind of the opposite of sort of like contractual obligation, how your resources are sewn into other folks. There's a lot of grief in the 8th house too, in Virgo for you, Aquarius. So this is kind of like all of the astrology for this week, the coming weeks, probably for the rest of this month, I would say. There's an emphasis on our relationships, our intimate ones, and there's also an emphasis on kicking back from them, watching what we say, watching who we say it to, and how we how we say it to them. And that's not to say that you need to silence yourself, because Lord knows we're all freaking sick and tired of silencing ourselves. What I am rapidly realizing is that this pressure cooker of a world right now and this injustice continual is becoming so much that perhaps there could be some fractures that occur in our relationships. We start to act out against people that we actually care about. It might be something that their ignorance of the current language might enrage you, or the kind of injustices that you see, Aquarius, might not mean so much to them. What I'm going to kind of emphasize is that your principles are your guiding light, and you know what the truth is, you know what to believe in, you know what environment you need to work in as well to aid this period of history. As I keep saying, it's a tough one, but like, and probably in this Cancer 6th house too, there's going that is about work. So it's like, how can I make sure that my boundaries are in check? How can I continue to show up in work, continue to help, continue to mobilize care and healing? That's what Cancer does. How can I do that in a way that's not going to bleed me dry? And will this new neighborhood, 3rd house, will this provide me with a bit of like a change of scenery enough that I can refuel? And it's not these folks that are around me so much, perhaps in time you can kind of come to recognize that people can only process what they're able to. And sometimes folks stick their head in the sand because it's safer, because they're too frightened, they don't know what to do. Helplessness can make people do all sorts of mad things. The only reason I'm talking about this, Aquarius, is because there is this kind of Venus having stationed retrograde in Leo as well. There's an extra kind of like, we've got to kind of review and go over how we're relating to people, how we're connecting with them too. That's something that this is this emphasis on connection. The dragon's tail in Libra, the sign that longs to bring folks together, to harmonize, to share beautiful relationships. There's almost like we're sort of shedding that in some way. We've got to focus in on ourselves in order to be good for the group. But we can't kick away from everyone. This is muddled. I hope it's making sense, Aquarius. I'm kind of maybe empathizing with you because our charts are sort of like, in this way anyway, it's kind of like a message from the future. I've just been through this 9th and 3rd eclipse season. You're about to go into it. I remember before my 9th and 3rd, it was for me the 10th and the 4th. There was a period of time where my career, my public self, up in flames, shed. There's major focus on my home, my roots, my ancestry that I had to face, that I couldn't not look at that part of life anymore. And the intel that sort of arose, the information that presented itself to me in that period of time was pretty intense. So I get where you're about to go. And I want for you to, have some like pride in the great way that you initiate care, that you think about other people, that you cook for them, that you nurture, that you long to do that. It's almost part of your daily rhythm is to do all of these things. So that's what the new moon is for. Yeah, it's kind of like the new version of you entering into the new neighborhood. What do they look like? What do they talk about? How do they connect? It's sort of like, I don't know, I've got Muriel, like goodbye porpoise spit kind of feeling as well. Like, my name isn't Muriel anymore, it's Mariel. That's something that happened to me. That's something that goes on in my head sometimes about my impulse, my kind of reclamation of identity. My name isn't Muriel anymore, it's Mariel. I'm this person now. I always was this person is maybe something that's more resonant. Maybe you can bring that to the table. Some of your authenticity that maybe was a little bit latent in your previous environment. Perhaps conversations that you felt you couldn't have. Perhaps that's where some of this exasperation and kickback in relationship is, because you're kind of stifling yourself. Maybe in this new environment, you won't have to do that. You can kind of lead with it. I've said it to a couple of other people in these readings, Aquarius, but I really do feel that we need to mobilize against this fascist propaganda that's permeating our culture. And perhaps that's something that you can embody as well as you enter this new environment. It's tempting for you to lead the charge, right? Head first into the new frontier. But you can only do that if you're confident in yourself. You can only do that if you trust yourself too. And this internal work, this internal ancestral healing has been really valuable, really gentle, and there will be a little last crescendo in October for you to grapple with. Not grapple with, for you to thrive, succeed, put to bed, reconcile. That's probably a better word. I don't like to think of healing as sort of like, that's finished, all done. I'm over that now. It's not, because sometimes it comes back, you know, it's what we've got to work with. But when it comes back, it's the way that we kind of operate in its company that shifts and changes, and our tactics for working through it rather than dealing with it. That's growth. There you go. That's your reading, Aquarius. I love you. I hope it was okay. Head to umaruby.com. I can read your tarot or your birth charts. If you're still here with me, throw me a crab in the comments. That would be really helpful. Tips are always welcome at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. And I'll be with you in 2 weeks to talk about the full moon in Aquarius. So all eyes back on you, girl, and kind of like your sense of self, your sense of individuation, your sense of like a soul's kind of like rising intention. There'll be a spotlight on that. So you can see again, there's this sort of like push and the pull between the individual and the group. I think the astrology is teaching us something about our culture too. I think it really is. It is a culture of individuation. It is a culture of like, you know, we're sort of staring into the black screen back at ourselves, putting ourselves, my tongue is too fat. None of this is making sense. As we enter at the age of Aquarius, which you're all going to lead the charge on, we're going to commune, and it's going to be like a co-op. We're going to work on our individual skills in order to service the group. We're going to get back to nature, back to basics, without the responsibility of having to carry everyone's weight on your shoulders, Aquarius, but with using your talents and your skills to benefit the group, and having other people use their talents and skills to benefit the group also in a different way that's not measured by accumulation. They're my final thoughts. Love you heaps. I'll see you soon. Bye. Hello Gemini rising, welcome to your horoscope for the new moon in Cancer, happening on July the 18th at 4:32 a.m. if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So it's going to be an early morning kind of rhythm. So if you wanted to do all of your magical work the night before, it'll still work. It'll still be great if you don't want to get up that early. But let's have a little deep dive into your second house, Gemini. This is where Cancer is for you in your birth chart. So the second is our resources, our finances, our values, how we accrue, what we do with it, how we generate, what we do with it, how we plant, how we wait, how we see it flourish. So this new moon is going to be a great reset in that part of your life. You can get really kind of practical and kind of pentacles about it. If you wanted to follow tarot speak, think about your coin, think about your finances, and think about the different ways that you can develop your relationship with that part of life. Some of us have a funny one. I know that it's difficult for me often when I think about that part of my chart. However, that leads into the next thing I was going to say. An hour and a half after this new moon, the dragon's head and the dragon's tail are going to change signs. They're going to shift into Aries and into Libra. And so this is kind of like the opening chapter or the beginning of a new story of shedding and of receiving, releasing and receiving, I might say. So the last 18 months, we've been having eclipses in Taurus and in Scorpio. So this is where we kind of had that sort of push and pull between our dream state and the practical grind of the day. There was almost an extra emphasis over the last 18 months into your unconscious world and kind of coming to terms with some of those inner workings, those journeys, not being frightened of them and not being kind of sort of feeling beholden to them either, but kind of having like following the guidance of the dragon, you know, wherever the dragon's pointing is the part of our chart where there's like a hunger to follow. So this moving into Aries, we now focus on your 11th house, your sense of belonging in community, your sense of good fortune and of friendships and those sorts of things. And that means that the tail will be leaving your 6th house of repetition into your 5th house of creative expression. And so there's things about your individual self-expression, your artistry, that you're going to feel are going to kind of release from you, perhaps, and perhaps they're going to aid and benefit the human condition. What I really feel, Gemini, and I'll be honest with you, is that the tension is high and the hatred is palpable, and that it must be really difficult to be a teenager right now. No matter where you are, it would be such a tough job to be hopeful and to be youthful and to look out into the future and think about, what would I like to be when I grow up? We know the reality of the climate crisis. We know that we need to mobilize on that. We know that we need to change the way that contemporary culture consumes. Absolutely we do. There's no excuses. We know that growth at all costs is detrimental to the health of not only the planet, but of the people too. We know this. We know that folks are suffering in their battle with their mental health, their mental condition. Perhaps this deluge or focus on your own over the last 18 months, Gemini, has brought with it lessons that you can now apply to your community. This is specific and you're ready for it, I reckon, Gemini. I think you really are. We look back into the past so as not to repeat it. We look back at the foibles, the mistakes, the patterns of what has gone on before. This is what astrology is really great for, because it kind of enforces us to be sort of amateur historians too. Because we do look back, we do look at the correlations, the similarities of the condition of time. And what we see looking out with the rising conservative language, with rights being stripped away, and this is not just in the grand old US of A, this is happening all over the place. The UK is a treacherous place to be right now to speak your mind and to claim your identity. The media, the popular media in that country is showing some revolting bigotry. The Vatican has come out and stood in solidarity, I guess, with this rhetoric. The devil fools us, they say. The devil's seductive. When we've got conservative, what's the language? Like self-described neoliberal conservatives, though, that are being supported by a fascist regime and being vocally supported, we've got a problem. The common denominator for all of this stuff is fascist propaganda. This is what powerful people do to gain more power, to gain control over a populace, is they individuate and they find the minority, they find the vulnerability in those, and they use that vulnerability of that minority as the red herring to place blame on all of the other things that might be controlling the mind. The fear of climate crisis, the fear of poverty, the fear of war, all of this stuff that is being presented to us globally, the red herring, the cause, the root cause of this is being so misplaced right now, and it's infectious. And so you could imagine couldn't you, Gemini? How people feel so completely gaslit and they're in obvious mental crisis. And this is where you come in, because you've got the skills. You lived through intense ecliptical period over the last 18 months of really coming into finer relationship with your inner workings, following the dragon, you might say, focusing in on how you work internally, what you've made of that, what sense you've made of that, what you've actively kind of invested in the training to not surmount, but kind of work with. And now the dragon's moving into your 11th house. So if you're going to stay on the back of that dragon and focus in on your sense of community, what and how can you actively contribute to the suffering of not just these minority groups that are being blamed right now, although I will say it is time for us all to mobilize, and we do stand stronger together, irregardless of what it is that you're being oppressed or savaged for. You look around and you can recognize other folks that are being savaged and repressed and oppressed, and you hold hands with them. You say, we're different, we don't have to be the same, but the feeling's the same, and so we revolt against this shit, because this is all lies. This is power for power's sake. This is a gross, egoic, manic monster that we're going to rise up against. And it kind of feels to me, Gemini, that this is your time. It really is. And that isn't to say that you need to kind of save us all. Absolutely not. Like as much emphasis on this as you need. But if this reading can work as like a bit of like support for what you already know as well, confirmation perhaps of what you've been thinking to yourself, you can see the pain, you can see the crisis. You're like, right, how am I gonna, where am I gonna, action stations, how do we mobilize? This next 18 months, I feel that these connections, as far as like interconnected community too, it might not be so local to you, but there'll definitely be connections that you're making, holding hands around the planet. We're all going to be doing this together, and we're all going to be mobilized. I don't know why I feel that way, but I really do. When I look to the astrology, I can kind of tell. There's another like face-off that happens a few days after this new moon in Cancer between Mars in Virgo and Saturn in Pisces. So it's sort of like mutable. So Saturn in your 10th house in Pisces, your most visible self, the part that's really obvious about you, that has a lot to do with your legacy. Saturn, who is bringing the lessons, the rules that we've needed at this time, Gemini, the boundary. There's going to be a bit of a face-off between Saturn and Mars in your 4th house, your ancestral world, your home life. So, like this happens every year that Mars will face off with Saturn. It's all right, but it's particularly happening in these two houses just after the nodes have shifted, just after there's been a new moon, and then 2 days after, Venus will also station retrograde. That's a whole bunch of astro speak, but I kind of wanted to get it clear to you that culturally, globally, we are going to be going through this sort of face-off between individuation and relationship. Individuation and relationship. There's going to be things that fall away, the way that we perhaps used to relate to people or relate with each other or something like that, like in that kind of bond. Things are going to shed. People are going to become hyper-focused on their individual sense of self, which is healthy. You're the one that's going to bring it all on home and mediate and be like, yes, this is my power. This is how I can work with this pain right now. I found it. I've been looking for the modality for a while, haven't you, Gemini? You've been looking for a way. How am I going to be of help? How am I going to aid my community? How am I going to provide this healing that I see is so desperately needed? All of these meanderings, Gemini, they're coming into sharper focus for you. That's what I really feel. And I have a feeling that with the company of the dragon's head in your 11th house in Aries, there is going to be no two questions about what your job is. It will be revealed to you really, really clearly, I imagine. I don't wish for you to come to these readings and for me to labor you with such reality and such truth. However, I think that in that mobilization, it's kind of part of my understanding of why on earth I'm doing this kind of work as well. It's to give us that much needed sense of relief that we're not alone in our minds, in our feelings, in our thoughts, in our fear. And the more of us that realize that we're not alone, the greater our number, and the greater we can stand together in strength and resist this fascist propaganda that is engulfing the world. The truth is going to come out. The lies are going to be revealed. The repercussions for actions are going to surface. And what you're great at, Gemini, is talking about it, is sharing information, processing that. Spreading the word is what you're really, really good at, Gemini. And so if you can spread this kind of word to everyone, as I'm trying to do with my Gemini moon, perhaps, then we can come together and we can recognize that there's power in the group. There's power in the 11th house. There's power on its way to Aquarius again. That's your reading, babe. Happy new moon in Cancer. Values, money, sure. Dragon's head. Let's do it. You've got the stuff and you've been working on it for ages, so I don't see that you need to be fearful of your own talents, Gemini. If you're still here with me, throw me a crab in the comments. That would be awesome. I'm going to be with you in 2 weeks and we're going to speak about the full moon in Aquarius. If you'd like me to read your birth chart, head to umaruby.com. Tips are always welcome at buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. Until then, I love you heaps and I'll speak to you soon. Bye, Gemini.